portfolio thing I had to submit. I appreciate God helping me through it. I pray I will pass it this time. I was able to pass it the other 2 times, thank the Lord. If I pass it this time, God willing, it should be the last time I have to ever submit it, because I'm hoping I can retire before the next time it's due. So if that comes to your mind, I do appreciate your prayers. But I do thank him for helping me through it. It's something a lot comes with it because of what I get, because I have to maintain that certification. So I just want to hopefully get it and move on. I thank him for that blessing, for having it. That's probably a little vague. I'm not going to bore you with all those details, but in a nutshell, thank the Lord for his goodness. There once was a man who seemed to have everything needed to succeed. And so in the thought that was on my mind for the lesson today, I asked on the internet for an example of somebody from history with a specific thought in mind. And this is the person that it came up with. His name was Richard Nixon, and by many accounts, he was brilliant at his job. So you read about some of the positives of this person. And for me, this is a point of self-reflection, okay? A point of looking at him as an example of, I guess you could say, caution. His name was Richard Nixon, and by many accounts, he was brilliant at his job. He worked hard, understood world affairs deeply, and helped accomplish things many thought impossible. Under his leadership, relationships were opened with China, tensions with powerful nations were reduced, and many people admired his intelligence and determination. From the outside, now, from the looking upon the situation with an outward perspective, Nixon looked like the complete package: disciplined, skilled, experienced, and effective. And I think for me, thinking about certainly looking at him from the outside, people would have assumed that, unless they knew him well, of course, but I would say some people could have assumed he's got it together. Discipline. He's described as disciplined, skilled, experienced, and effective. I don't know things about him from living through that time period because I wasn't around, but this is what I'm reading about him. But hidden beneath all those strengths was one dangerous flaw, and that flaw became his undoing. Apparently, he battled insecurity that grew into suspicion and secrecy. Insecurity that grew into a breach of security, apparently, as well, literally. Instead of trusting people, he became fearful of opponents and obsessed with protecting himself and his administration. That fear slowly influenced his decisions. So the power of fear causing us to focus on a flaw, the power of giving over to a flaw. And that's what he did. He gave over to his flaw. Eventually, men connected to his campaign broke into, and this is very famous, Brother Rob mentioned it this morning, to the Watergate building. And they broke in there to spy on political opponents during what became known as the Watergate scandal. And that is infamous. I mean, that's extremely famous scenario from history. At first, the situation could have been handled honestly. Mistakes can sometimes be corrected when truth and humility step in early. Sometimes, if we're willing to own we have a flaw, it's much easier to fix it, address it, and keep ourselves from future danger, isn't it? Admitting that, okay, this is a flaw, I've got to work on this. But instead, Nixon's flaw drove him towards something worse, a cover-up. He allowed his flaw, unfortunately, to lead him to more bad decisions, and it ended up being a cover-up. The secrecy, denial, and misuse of power became larger than the original wrongdoing. And I think that's interesting. Because he gave into his flaw, instead of taking steps to make sure that he was working on the flaw, understanding it could cause him trouble, he gave into it. And this is what I found when I read this. The secrecy, denial, and misuse of power became larger than his original wrongdoing. It led to something significantly worse. And in the end, the flaw that had quietly lived beneath the surface overshadowed nearly all the good he had accomplished. Because I can guarantee you, when Brother Rob saw his picture, what word did he say to me? Watergate. Not skilled leader, not opened relations to China. He said what is known as the result of his flaw, because that's natural, isn't it? That's what he's famous for. People no longer mainly remembered his diplomacy. They no longer memorialized his intelligence. They no longer thought about his achievements. Instead, they remembered his scandal that was a result of his flaw. The man who had reached one of the highest offices in the world became the first U.S. president ever to resign. From there, we learn a very sobering lesson, which I think, for me, is just an individual who wants to live for God, to use things and thoughts that I may have as points of personal reflection. A flaw can become a downfall if not careful. The story teaches a lesson of a person can possess talent, they can possess intelligence and discipline, they can even possess experiences of great success, but be undone by one uncontrolled character flaw. And that's scary. He is not memorialized in many regards, he's not talked about in any way about successes or capabilities and potential that he held. Instead, it is the flaw that he allowed to overtake him. His flaw, described in what I read, was insecurity that led him to become suspicious and led him to be involved in things, and he became the first president to have to resign. Character matters so deeply. Gifts open doors. He obviously had gifts to get to the highest office, right? There was something about him that allowed him to get to that point in life. Skills can build success, looks can draw attention, but integrity is what sustains a life. It did not matter about all those positives, because in the end, it was his flaw and the decisions he made because of his flaw that led to his downfall. And again, I think about that. It didn't matter how successful he had been. It didn't matter how well he looked the part in terms of presidential, in terms of holding the office and representing the country, opening diplomacy with China. None of that mattered, because he allowed his flaw to become his downfall. That flaw ended up dictating the end result. And it reminds us in Proverbs 16 and 32, if you wish to look there. Mr. Austin, would you care to get me a little cup of water? I appreciate that. In Proverbs 16 and 32, he that ruleth his spirit is better than he that taketh a city. There's a lot of things people can have together. But if I allow a flaw, it doesn't matter how much success has been built, it doesn't matter how much anything, the integrity sustains a life. The experience is sustained if I can address a flaw and try and take steps to correct it. Thank you so much. Run her hand and get onto her. I'm kidding. I'm just teasing. We didn't really have, well, anyway. One unchecked weakness can damage what took years to build. When I read that really stood out to me. One unchecked flaw. One flaw that we can't admit is a problem, one flaw that we can't admit is trouble, can damage. He didn't just become president because one day he was 8 years old and said, I'm going to be president. It took years of effort, years of commitment, probably, who knows how much money, time, effort, and energy. But because he gave into a character flaw, a weakness, it led to worse and worse decisions that overtook his entire presidency, his entire experience. And what took years to build fell because of one flaw that was unchecked. So as an individual, I have a duty to continually allow God to shape me, not just with abilities, but within my heart. Am I willing to say, okay, this is a flaw. Okay, I'm letting this particular trait in my personality or in my habits of decision making, I'm letting it become a hindrance to me, and I need to address it. Because if I don't, left unchecked, it can destroy what it took years to build. He is an example, sadly, of that. Years, a virtual lifetime of work to get to the highest office in our country. One flaw became his undoing. He was insecure, and therefore he became suspicious, and he ended up breaching security and things of that nature. And you think about the dangers of letting one flaw get out of control in your life. And this is what I think is very important. Now, he ended up doing things that were illegal, which is wrong and whatever. But flaws do not inherently imply sin. Because I think it's easy to hear thoughts about flaws or character and think, oh yeah, those poor sinners. Well, who's Danny Eldreth? Let me tell you, by the grace of God, I may not be doing something sinful, but I got my flaws and I need to work on them. But I can't work on anything I won't own and admit. And because he couldn't own and admit his issue, that is just so sad to me. Years of effort and preparation and years of other people's work standing behind him. One character flaw damaged it all, undid an entire potential legacy. Flaws do not mean, again, that somebody's in danger of hellfire. But if left unchecked, flaws can mean that I'm hurting my witness with other people. And that is, to me, what is sad. It's sad that he lost a presidency. It's sad that he allowed this situation to undo his legacy. But he could still die right and go to heaven. I don't know how it was with him, but people can still make their life right. Things can still be corrected in that regard. And I think about, I don't want a flaw in my life to become something the devil can use to harm my witness with other people. I can put tons of effort. I can attend every service. I can stand here and try and do these lessons with God's help. But if I have a flaw that is checked, a flaw that is not kept in place, a personality trait that is not kept checked with God's Spirit, then what if I undo everything I've tried to do with somebody else as a witness? What good am I really accomplishing in that regard? I might still be okay and I'm going to heaven. And maybe people even feel sorry for me. Can't he just see that this is causing him trouble? But until I own it and recognize it, it ain't going to change. It's not going to be any different. I think about when I was reading through the stuff that I used to prepare, and it gave me an example of, it used even a teacher. A teacher can be respected, but you know what? A teacher can be ruined by something as simple as pride, especially an experienced teacher. An experienced teacher can run the risk of not being open-minded and listening to others. There's a young teacher beside me. I love working sometimes with some of the newbies because sometimes they just have some nice oomph, some enthusiasm, keep a little spark, and they have a little spark in their step. And so she did this review thing, and I thought, that is so cool. I'm not going to say, oh, you should have done mine. No, I'm a loser. I know better. I'm older, and I'm like, I think I want to take your idea, and I want to do a review game like that. She's like, well, you want me to share it with you? I've already made it. I'm like, yeah, sure. Duh. Why would you not take it? I can't have the flaw of, oh, no, I don't need your stuff. I don't need to hear from you little young one who doesn't know as much as me. That is, to quote Brother Brewer again, hogwash. What she has is good, and I can use it just as good as I could anything else. And why would I not do that? But pride can become something. A teacher who cannot listen to sound reasoning from someone else can be less effective in the classroom. And as a result of their unwillingness to be open to suggestions and change, they don't just hurt themselves, their fault hurts their students. Now I can relate to that because I teach. Proverbs 16:18, pride goeth before destruction, and an haughty spirit before a fall. Often, if someone acts like they've got it all figured out, I'm already suspicious. And I don't mean that cynically. No. If you're not in a constant state of growing, then how are you walking around if you're dead? Because I think we all have ways we can grow until we are gone. There are always ways I can self-reflect. There are always ways I can continue to get better. It doesn't matter that I am now, this is kind of freaky, when you line up the people, oldest, most experienced in the school, I've gone from here, it seems like in 3 days. I'm in the next group of retirement, God willing. Now that happened overnight, it feels like. That happened in no time. But I can't have a haughty spirit. I've still got stuff I can learn. A Christian can be gifted, a believer, and I hate to say that word because the devil believes, but he ain't no Christian. But let's just say a Christian, someone who sincerely wants to live a spiritual life. They can be gifted, but they can be harmed by flaws. And Rhonda Ray, I thought of an example she uses. She says to me, because she does those little, well, not little sometimes, but that baking stuff. She says to me, people purchase with their eyes first. And that's true, isn't it? That is really true. Because if you're scrolling online, often the way something looks catches your eye, right? I think anybody gets that. We get that. But if a baked item doesn't look very presentable, then often people won't even try it. But you know what's funny? Is even if it doesn't look very presentable, sometimes those can still taste good. But people will miss out because it didn't sell the eyes first. But the opposite can be true too. So I was thinking about that phrase, and I thought, you know what? Think of Nixon. He had everything. He had the credentials, the backing, and he got into office. But he let something become his downfall. You could take something that looks amazing and beautiful, let's say a cake. Maybe someone could say, man, that's so nice, it belongs on an ad. But then you take a bite of it. Dry. The icing is just not sweet enough. The quality's terrible. The flavor's nasty. The texture is just awful. Do you think they want any more of that? But it looked good. Did that matter? No. It had a flaw. It had a flaw that took away from the way it presented itself. It had a flaw. And I think about that on a deeper level as a Christian. I don't want a flaw or something within my life to take away from what someone may think I can present to their life. Because again, the cake on the surface looked like the perfect one to buy. Beautiful. Should be on a TikTok video, should be made about it. Who knows, whatever. But then they took a bite. Ugh, I want no more of that. And you know, that can become a metaphor for a Christian's life. Maybe on the surface, like Nixon, everything looks like it's together. Everything looks great. But if not careful, you take a bite of that cake or a bite, get a little experience into my life. And what if I'm letting a flaw ruin all the good that you thought they could see? And that weighed on me. God, help me to be careful. God, help me to be cautious. Because it's not, once you experience the cake, you realize, I don't want no more of that. I don't want to represent Christ in that way. I don't want to be a representation that someone gets an experience and says, oh, no thanks. If that's how he's going to be, and if that's what that's producing in his life, yeah, I thought it seemed all right. It seemed like brother so-and-so or sister so-and-so had it pretty well together. But once I got a taste, no thanks. I don't want to be that. And that weighed on me. Richard Nixon, on the surface and based on credentials, had it together. But his flaw ruined it all. He was undone by a character flaw he let control his life. Proverbs 4:23, keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. Within our heart, there are so many things that God will work in our heart to teach us and show us. We hear things in messages that God can use to stir our heart and make us think. And I want to do that. But then I also think when someone gets an experience, just like Rhonda Ray saying to me, people purchase with their eyes first. But if you take a bite of the cake and it's nasty, it doesn't matter how well it looked, they don't want nothing else to do with it. And I thought, I don't want to become a metaphor for that for Jesus. Once they get a taste, once they get an experience of Danny, no thanks. I don't want none of that. If I do not monitor my life and my heart with all diligence, as the verse said, then I can allow a personality flaw to harm my influence. And I just thought of some examples because I know certainly what I battle. I can tell you, you probably already know. Some of you've known me for maybe all my life. But like for me, I have an attention to detail. It has served me well in my job. It has served principals well because they'll sometimes ask you to do things because they know you'll pay attention. I hope I've served them well. I didn't mean I had, you know what I meant. But you can drive someone else crazy with that. What could be used as a talent can drive someone else bonkers. And I can't. You have to find that balance. So just that's an example with me where I'm still to this day, and thank God for a patient wife, trying to work on that. If I'm too sensitive, then people will feel that they have to be too careful around me when they speak. And what happens after someone gets that feeling? After so long, what are they going to do? They ain't going to speak to me. They're not going to interact with me because it's not worth their time and energy. They feel drained. I may feel like a drain to them. I'm not sinning. No word did I sin. It's a flaw. It's a character flaw that I'm not willing to own and address. Often as adults, we can, and if not careful, we view our flaws as I'm being me. But if being me is not appealing, I'm just like that cake. Well, except I'm not a pretty package, sorry. But if I were a pretty package, and then someone comes and interacts with me and they're like, it looks like it's all together, but no thanks. Because there's more to it. When you buy a cake, you don't stop there. Anybody ever bought a cake and froze it so they could open their freezer? Look at that pretty thing. I've never done that. If you have, that's interesting. That's very interesting. But anyway, that you be you, not me. Often you want to experience it. But what does the experience leave? It leaves a taste in your mouth. And that's what I can do as a person too. And I want to be cautious. I may not represent an unpresentable image. Nixon didn't. But once people get to know me and they find my personality flaw unattractive, they want nothing. I've left a bad taste in their mouth. They want nothing else to do with me. And for me, when I think about that, and I know people can nitpick and always find something. I live in the real world the same as you. But I think about, for me personally, how can I be a witness to someone about God if they can't get beyond what they experience once they know me? That can harm my witness. President Nixon had many positives, according to what I read. I didn't live in that time period to have my own opinions per se. But President Nixon had many positives. But a leader can be effective. He is an example. Destroyed by one flaw. He was a presentable president in credentials, backing. Obviously, he worked hard. I mean, he went through all this. He did whatever you were supposed to do, apparently, to get to the highest office in the United States of America. But he allowed one flaw to take a stronghold in his life. And rather than rebuke it and refute it, what did he do? He nurtured it, and he basically accepted it. And what happened? He became one of the most negative examples of a presidency in U.S. history. That is his legacy because of a flaw. And if not careful, instead of rebuking and accepting, okay, I've got to work on this, people can get to the point where it's like they accept, well, that's just who I am. Well, how's it working out for you? Danny, I'll put it on me first. I don't mind. My wife will tell you, I self-reflect and I try. I don't always get it, but I try. She's probably hoping I try harder. A Christian can love God sincerely, but yet allow a weakness to gain control. Just like Nixon, it was over time. It built into worse and worse and worse. And all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're in too deep. What was he really going to do? To admit it would probably undo many other lies if I had to get, I don't know the history of all of it for sure, but in often cases to try to undo something, somebody's having to admit many other things that they didn't want to admit. Once something gains control, one does not always just forsake it unless there's some kind of divine intervention. Oftentimes, this is what's sad, people end up nursing some of their flaws and living in a way that makes others feel like, on the outside watching them, that they've just accepted their flaw as who they are or a way of life. And instead of it being an encouragement to people, people look at it and say, oh, how sad. It looks like they've just settled. This is how life is going to be, and this is how I've got to let it be. But if that flaw is damaging someone's life, and God forbid it's damaging their witness, then there is no good being accomplished. My wife says people purchase that cake with their eyes first. A cake that looks pristine but tastes terribly dry is not a successful baking job. It doesn't matter how much good Mr. Nixon did, he's probably not ranked as a successful presidency. He had to resign. The flaw led to something that overshadowed all his good. No matter the image that it presented, a cake can present to a customer. If it tastes dry, it ain't no good. And I think about that as a metaphor for me as an individual. It's not, if I say I am a Christian, when we have those young children here, my wife one time, may I use this one? Well, I didn't ask her. Do you mind, Rhonda, if I use it? One day, I have a former student in high school, and I don't say this for myself. I have a former student that I taught. He's in high school, and sometimes he'll email me and say, can you help me tonight on Zoom? And I say, sure, I'll try to help you, buddy. Now, he's a teenage boy. I log on to Zoom, but guess who doesn't? The teenage boy. And I'll leave it running for a while. He didn't show up. And one day, Rhonda Ray, she's just curious. She's like, so aren't you enabling him? Why are you doing that? And I said, Rhonda, I've taught children in their life. I may choke up. Adults have not always showed up for them. And whether or not he ever shows up, I want him to know I tried. And I can't be ranked among the adults who didn't show up. It doesn't matter. I'm letting the Zoom run. I'm still doing whatever I want. having to remember to hit pause on record. Those things record automatically. And here me and Rhonda Ray being in the house, being Rhonda Ray and Danny, and I've got to remember to hit pause on the record, or that'll be on there, me and her just living in our house. But it doesn't matter. I just try to do my best with that situation, and I can leave it alone for that. So when I think about as a Christian, if I say that I am this, just like the cake gives an image that it's this beautiful cake, and you cut into it, and it's dry as dirt, or you can't cut it because it's too stale. You have to feel like you're sawing it. That is not a good cake, is it? Well, as a Christian, what is the experience beyond just the initial impression? That is a weight that I feel I need to carry and I need to think about. What is the experience beyond just the initial? When the rubber meets the road, image in terms of that cake in particular definitely matters when trying to sell goods. But when rubber meets the road, if it tastes bad, the look of it no longer matters because nobody is going to buy it. And once they get a bad taste in their mouth, they probably don't care how good the others look, because what are they going to remember? The bad taste. And I don't want to be that as a Christian. I don't want to be that as an example before other people. They would consider themselves wasting their money if they thought about pursuing it again. So when preparing this lesson, I really found myself thinking about that topic, how a flaw can become my downfall, or our downfall. If you collectively, as a body of people, we each have individual things. If you come into my classroom, you will see everything that stereotypically represents a teacher in a classroom. And you'll see a lot of new technology, since maybe some of y'all been in school, even since I was. If you watch me with kids, you'll see the image of a person fulfilling the role of educator. But the question for me, that I can put it in my job, what flaws do I harbor underneath the surface of what you see? Those things you wouldn't necessarily see from just watching me, would you? You wouldn't necessarily know the flaws that I'm harboring, that I need to work on and pray about and contend with and improve upon and reflect upon. If left unchecked, those flaws can hurt my abilities as a teacher, despite what you see that lets you know I'm a practicing educator. You don't know what's beneath the surface. And that is what matters to people once they know us, isn't it? What is beneath the surface? Is there something there that is going to be a positive witness to me in my life? Is there something there that can give me hope that there's something better for my life? Because maybe, just maybe, there's the assumption that it's there. Just like you can assume, oh, he's a teacher. I see him, he's in that room and they're teaching. You don't know the underlying flaws that I may contend with, that I have to work on and pray about and admit and try to make better. If left unchecked, flaws can hurt my abilities despite what you see. Think about Nixon. Insecurity brought down Nixon because he became suspicious and his actions led to more dire choices. He made worse and worse decisions. And eventually it ended up he resigned from his presidency. His legacy is not defined by any good he accomplished. Instead, it's marred by the outcomes from nurturing a flaw. He is remembered because of one of his insecurities, which was insecurity. Saul began with tremendous promise. He was chosen by God to be the first king of Israel. He looked like a leader, inspired confidence, and initially showed humility. When Samuel first introduced him to the people, Saul even hid among the baggage because he felt unworthy of the position. He had opportunities, gifting, authority, and the support of the nation. But one flaw slowly became his downfall: disobedience rooted in pride and fear of people. Instead of fully obeying God, Saul increasingly cared about appearances, public opinion, and protecting his own position. One major moment came when God commanded Saul to completely destroy the Amalekites and their possessions. He only partially obeyed. Partially obeyed still means there was disobedience, doesn't it? Sparing the king, and keeping the best animals. Then he tried to justify it spiritually when confronted. In 1 Samuel 15, 22 and 23, Samuel said, "Hath the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. Because thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, he hath also rejected thee from being king." Saul's flaw, say that too fast and you get slaw. Again, Saul's flaw continued growing He had jealousy toward David that ended up consuming him. Fear, insecurity, anger, and pride took over his qualities that once made him promising. Didn't matter that he at one point played the part, looked the part, had the part, fulfilled the part. He let other things come in and crowd out the good, and that's scary. Instead of focusing on leading the nation and leading the nation well, he became obsessed with protecting his throne and destroying David. In the end, Saul's life was a tragic example, kind of like the one we read about in somewhat recent history. The man who once looked full of potential lost his peace, lost his influence, lost his family stability, and eventually he lost the kingdom. His story is sobering because Saul did not collapse overnight, and that's the thing that gets me. If you read about or learn about any people who have been dictators in nations and have overtaken them, I'll never forget this thing I heard about the Great Wall of China. The ruler at the time was so understanding that to win, it takes patience. Just as the wall was built one stone at a time, embassies and kingdoms and dynasties and countries can be taken over one fight at a time. Now, that is not his quote, but a downfall can come from one bad choice being laid like a brick in a wall upon another. And before long, you have built a wall around yourself of poor choices. And now how are you going to climb out of it? God help. His downfall came one compromise at a time. His gifts were real, but his character flaw was never fully surrendered to God. And that phrase, one compromise at a time, if you really think about that, compromise is when a person gradually gives up, they weaken in an area, they bend from what they know is right in order to gain convenience, approval, comfort, advantage, control, or relief from pressure. But none of that has to involve sin. Have you ever compromised your diet? I'm the king of that. Anybody? Does it mean I sinned? It means you gave up. You gave in. You compromised on what your goals were for a momentary pleasure. None of that has to involve sin. If someone has nursed a flaw for so long that they've given up thinking things will get better, they will become the masters of making bad choices because they've, just like Nixon did, he entangled himself in something worse that got worse, and it ruined him. And it started out with his inability to control a flaw. Bad decisions build and people just feel and appear to be buried from their poor choices. The whole process, though, only started with giving in once. It only started with giving in once. One compromise at a time can lead somebody to really bad choices like King Saul. And what does this example say to people? Again, I'm not referencing sin. I think that's important for me to recognize that it's not just sinful things that ruin people. Bad decisions don't always entail doing something spiritually wrong. The danger is heeding flaws don't always just stop with making a poor choice. It can lead to something wrong or sinful if not careful. So I'm going to give you an example. Let's just say, for example, as a made-up example, Rhonda Ray, it's been over 2 years now. She bought me this little surprise. It's a little MacBook Air, so I'd have a little laptop at home. I've never had one. I liked it, and I kept talking about it. So she decided she'd never done that kind of thing after we'd married, to my knowledge, to that level. And so she decided she'd surprise me. I was so excited. And I love it. Now, I have no need for a new one because they're not cheap. But I don't have a need for a new one. But I thought about the way the devil loves to work in someone's mind. Now, this is a silly example. I'm just using it. That's why I'm just making something up. Thank the Lord, right now, I'm not battling this, even if I'm tempted with the thought of how, when I see them advertised, I move on. What if I suddenly decided, I think I should upgrade? I think, you know what, those new ones, they're probably faster. Maybe they're even thinner than my little one. Now, God forbid I compromise on my understanding that having this item is not cheap. And I convince myself, and you pray for me. I just pray, Lord, please help me to not fall prey to this ideology. I convince myself of this nonsense. You deserve this, Danny. Let me tell you something. I don't deserve the breath that entered my nose this morning. I had it by the grace of a merciful, loving God that gave me life. And it is okay. It is okay that she bought me that thing. I'm not taking away from that. Don't misinterpret. But I have what I have by the grace of God alone. I'm grateful. And I pray I don't fall into that overthinking that concept. I deserve this. If I can get it, I should be thankful. God help me. But what if I compromised on my understanding and I made the decision to buy one? All of a sudden, Rhonda Ray's like, why did you buy that? What you have is just fine. She should say that to me because it's true. I gave into a flaw. I gave into a fallacy of thinking, you deserve this, Danny. Do you think President Nixon ever at some point thought, I should be able to do this because I've worked hard to get here? I deserve this. I don't know. But that's a common ideology, isn't it? And don't get me wrong, we can work hard and God can bless us, and maybe there is an attribute of deserving. I get it. But I think falling prey to that thought process becomes a justification for very bad choices, if not careful. That way of thinking, if left unchecked, it doesn't stay with Danny deserves this. It evolves into you need this. Now, do I need a new MacBook Air? Absolutely not. God help me to be prayerful, mindful, realistic, and thankful. I have my flaws. Unfortunately, I have many. But I don't want to let them become a hindrance to other people and a hindrance to my witness for the Lord. Because can you imagine, Brother Rob, if I'm talking to him about something like, yeah, this or that, and then he could say, brother, what made you think you deserve that? And he should say that to me. Self-reflection is something every person can benefit from. My guess is, if we're being honest, all of us have our flaws, and if you can't think of one, you pray for mine. If you can't think of one for yourself, if you can't think of one, I might know what your flaw is. Areas of our lives, we probably all have that we'd like to get better and build upon. And if you don't have any such issues, again, you pray for me that I keep myself in check with God's help, because I think about, we have an example from life and history that we can't refute truly happened. We have a further back example from life and history that's memorialized in the Bible for us to learn from. A flaw can take us down. And it's not just about the personal downfall that comes. Do you think when Nixon lost his presidency, it just hurt him? Imagine being on his staff and you've given up weekends, birthdays, family vacations, so you could work on a campaign. All for what? Him to let a bad decision undo it all? Others are watching, aren't they? And I want to carry the weight of that responsibility with the seriousness that it deserves. God help me to be careful. That, again, it doesn't mean it's anything sinful. Now, Nixon led into stuff that obviously was very, very wrong. I think even illegal. So that's a different story. But you pray for me. We'll give it to Brother Mark.
Very good things of caution in that lesson this morning. I appreciate it. I kept thinking about that one scripture there about things being good in our own eyes. But, we really got to be honest with ourselves and really do some soul searching. Sure don't want to be hindered by something that the enemy stirs up in my mind or in my heart or whatever. I don't want to let him have that part. We got to use caution. Be careful. Be soul searching. Look and ask the Lord to help us. All right, we'll take just a little bit of a break and move on with the service shortly, Lord willing.